Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Star Trek Discovery Season 4, Episode 3, Choose to Live. This video is part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek Discovery, so I'll have to start with a spoiler warning for Discovery up to Season 4, Episode 3. If you have not seen up to this point, you will not want to watch this video. Otherwise, some things will be spoiled for you. So, this episode was fine. I know some people get offended or take issue if I call this a filler episode, but kind of what it was. I mean, you could say it's a character building episode if you prefer, but it's one of those episodes that doesn't really address the main story of the season. This applies less to Star Trek and more to sort of serialized storytelling shows. The more modern serialized storytelling show where Walking Dead, Breaking Bad, Game of Thrones, etc., pretty much any modern show, where there will be a continuous ongoing storyline, but every once in a while we'll have an episode that doesn't really fulfill or do anything to satisfy that storyline. It's just there to build the characters, or if more cynical point of view, and this is definitely the case with The Walking Dead, it's just there to fill up space, hence the term filler. Now, so the main plot with the Quat Mulat, where this Quat Mulat Romulan goes rogue and kills a Starfleet officer, that's a filler plot. I'm sorry, but it is. Like, it's interesting. I mean, some people actually like episodes like this because they have their own, it's like kind of an episodic feel within a serialized format. So the ongoing storyline is still there and is still addressed in this episode. We're reminded that it exists and it does play a factor, but this episode has its own sort of standalone plot. Now, some people like that, and in some circumstances I like that too, but this plot wasn't interesting enough for me to really care. I mean, don't get me wrong, I think the start with seeing a different Starfleet ship was cool. As soon as we saw a different Starfleet ship with a different crew, I'm like, ooh, because this isn't something we've gotten much in Discovery since, in the past 2 seasons, since they've gone to the 32nd century or whatever century they're in. We haven't really seen much any ships outside of Discovery, so it's interesting to see a different ship with a different crew. But let me be blunt here. The actor who played the commander was a bad actor. I'm sorry, I was a bit distracting. Like, you're not very good. They could have gotten someone better. And the way the Quat Mulat were portrayed was a bit hokey for my taste. I'm sorry. Now, I always thought the Quat Mulat were cool on Picard and the whole choose to live thing. But I don't know. Maybe I'm being silly, but I feel like this is a Picard thing. That it didn't really... I mean, I know we were introduced in last season with Burnham's mother being the leader of Quat Mulat, which I still think is dumb. I'm sorry. And so that's another strike against that episode. I don't really like the character of Burnham's mother, to be fair. And I think her being like a Quat Mulat is... that just... I don't know. It seems really forced, and it doesn't really add up to me, and I don't like it. And I didn't really care for her interactions with Burnham in this episode. I don't care. And so, but, I mean, the plot was somewhat interesting. You have a Quat Mulat who kills a Starfleet officer, steals the lithium, nobody knows why, and there's a little mystery. And they go to solve it, and it turns out to be, there's a entire species that she's trying to save, which is a very Star Trek, almost too Star Trek, almost like cliche territory of a Star Trek plot or a big reveal, but whatever. That's all well and good and fine and dandy. So it was interesting enough, but the whole thing with the Quat Mulat and Burnham's mother Wasn't a fan of that aspect of it. Now that I've gotten a lot of negatives out of the way, I will say this episode actually was effective at character building. So, which is why maybe I shouldn't call it a filler episode, because most of these episodes are... I think it is necessary in a serialized format to take a breath and not always go full throttle. Then you risk being too rushed and being too plot heavy. Season 8 Game of Thrones. And so you do need a lot of care, because if you're familiar with my channel, I've said this a lot, and you may notice from my reviews, I'm all about the character stories. That's what I really latch on to. That's what makes a show great for me. If it has strong characters, great character stories. That's a department Discovery's been kind of off and on about, let's say. Let's be generous. And so this, so I do appreciate good character stories, even if they're not plot heavy. And this one has a bit of a decent amount of good character stories in it, like particularly, like I didn't care for Michael Burnham. Like I said, I have no connection with her and her mother, and I think the whole thing is stupid. But I actually liked what they did with Tilly in this episode, how she's trying to get out of her comfort zone. At first I thought, when they included Tilly in the mission, I'm like, that's stupid, they should get a security officer. But once she was there, they actually needed like an engineer, so she came in handy. And plus, she did provide that sort of moment of levity in that outsider's perspective that was needed. So I actually kind of like what they did with her. But more to the point, I like the side plots better in this episode. We get a side plot with Stamets and Book speaking to the Vulcans about the anomaly, and I actually really like this. I like the interactions with the Vulcans, with the scientists, is very Vulcan-like, but not in an annoying, not too stereotypical way, in a way that like was subtle and made sense, and I liked it. But more to the point, I love what they did with Book, how they're continuing his storyline of grieving. It makes a lot of sense, and how he has to face the trauma, and Stamets is like warning him against it because he knows how sore the subject rightfully is to him. But Book is like, no, willing to face it, and he was willing to relive the events of his biggest trauma, because he would do anything to try to help formulate. Now, as far as the main plot goes, it doesn't really do much for it. It's just Stamets had a theory, and they eliminated that theory in this episode. So there we go. We're back to square one, as they say. Which, as I said, I don't have that big of an issue with, because the character story in the storyline was so good. Involving Book and facing his fears, and seeing like that his nephew was smiled at him before he died, and so he knows, he's reassured that he loves him. Like, that was a powerful scene, particularly when Book comes out of the mind meld and there's tears in his eyes. Like, that was a good character move. That was a good, powerful scene. So I enjoyed that a lot. Then there's the storyline with Gray and Adair, which I hadn't really touched on in the previous episodes because it didn't really do much, but it was more front and center here because they had, of course, another Picard reference where they had the synthetic body in the previous episode. Colbert outright mentions, like, references Picard. Oh, there was some captain named Picard who did this. So anyway, so this is when they finally like do the procedure, where they transfer Gray's consciousness into this synthetic life form to try to bring him sort of back to the corporeal world, shall we say. And at first, when they did the transfer, and the Guardian was like, "Oh, we don't know if it will work. It could be dangerous." If that felt a bit took me out of the story a bit and felt a bit, oh, these are the writers trying to create stakes, which I still feel is the case. And definitely, like they can't just have a procedure and everything goes as normal. They have to introduce elements of danger. Ooh, could go wrong. We gotta raise the stakes, have some tension. Which I think, honestly, I think Discovery more than a lot of shows falls victim to that. I mean, not that Discovery's alone in being a Star Trek show that did that. Voyager and Enterprise had that huge problem as well, especially Voyager. The whole thing with four-head aliens attacking the ship every episode in the later seasons, but actually it didn't bother me that much once everything was said and done, because I actually did enjoy the I felt it was quite powerful seeing Adira like by Gray's side, holding his hand and wanting him to come back to them. That was good stuff. That was powerful stuff. And then when Gray actually did awaken, I must admit a few tears coming to my eyes. I actually thought that was actually a very powerful moment, and especially when Culber came in and Gray hugged him, like that felt like really well earned. Like, because we've only known Gray. Gray actually died, really, and it was just this kind of non-corporeal entity, like a voice inside Adira's head, but he had this kind of relationship with Culber, even though Culber couldn't see him or hear him. Culber always trusted Adira and knew that Adira was telling the truth, and always addressed Gray directly, and Culber, of course, arranged for this whole thing to happen, and was kind of like a surrogate father to him. And so to see Gray actually finally come to life and be corporeal and hug Culber is really touching. And of course, having Adira and Gray still have that connection, and Gray confirming that was Adira sort of who guided him to consciousness, that was really touching too. So it was a really touching scene. I thought it was quite powerful. So I'm able to forgive the whole, let's create tension, because what they ended up doing with it was actually really good. And I do admit it brought a couple tears to my eyes. So it was a powerful character moment. Basically, to summarize everything, I prefer the subplots to the main plot. So anyway, my rating for Choose to Live out of 10, I'm gonna give this an 8. Extremely good. I was almost gonna give it a 7, because I think the main plot is very cliche and it was very average. It was very mediocre. That's what I'm looking for. It's mediocre. The main plot was mediocre. I didn't really care much about it. I mean, it was okay. It was kind of exciting, and I like what they did with Tilly, but I really don't give two shits about Burnham's relationship to her mother. I'm sorry, but I don't. However, I decided to give this an 8 on the strength of the subplots, because as I said, I think the subplots are actually really powerful. Both of them. Like, they got me emotional with a book coming to terms with his trauma, and Gray coming back to life, and the effect that it has on this little surrogate family they have going. That was very powerful too. So I will give this an 8. It was a decent episode, but we'll see what Discovery does next. Anyway, that is it for my review of this episode. Be sure to check out my channel as I continue to cover Discovery, as well as all things Star Trek, as well as covering other shows like The Expanse, Star Wars, The Clone Wars, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.